Say that again?
We're hoping they wouldn't do that.
Yeah, because I mean, if you build your house yourself, and then, or maybe you contributed and build it out with your friend and you are sharing the apartment, you want to go and take up the roof because it's part of your property. That's what we're trying to achieve with the NGFCP. So we're moving from, and of course, Charles will speak to what we call the conflict entrepreneurs. But I want to mention that those people do not come to distort the progress of this NGFCP. So as part of our design, we found out that by the time we trigger a set of 50 to 60 projects in the next 1.5 to 2 years, we will generate around 300,000 direct and indirect jobs. Now, let me give you some numbers around the negatives of the gas flare commercialization. In a year, the volume of gas will flare will lose over $1 billion US. Our 22 tons CO2 that we emit, if we take it to the carbon market, it gives us around $500 million US. So what the NGFCP will do now, it will reverse all of this and now bring this money to contribute to the GDP of the country. We will create jobs. If we look at it from an energy perspective, it will run about 1 to 2 mini LNG. It will generate around 3,000 megawatt of electricity. In this country, just like Charles mentioned, our LPG penetration and utilization is very, very low. And yet we have abundant gas. The NGFCP will unlock around 600,000 metric tons of liquefied petroleum gas. That will give around 6 million households clean access to energy, as opposed to the poor and polluting energy that we have. Now, I don't want to go into the health and environmental issues because we won't live here.
Well, all we want is industrialization of the use of this gas.
Correct.
When we return from this break, already you've pointed out that Charles will be looking at the issue of conflict entrepreneurs, as well as what more do we get in terms of prospects for this area that we're looking into for the nation and also for the international stage. You're watching Nigeria Today, and we're looking at harnessing Nigeria's gas wealth. We'll be right back with my guests in a short while. Yes, welcome back. You're still watching Nigeria Today, and my guest, Justice Derefaka and Charles Bajomi, are still here taking a look at harnessing Nigeria's gas wealth. Okay, gentlemen, before the break, we already started talking about what opportunities are there. But then there are also the other side of conflict and insecurity generally. Okay, Charles, you were to take us on that lane. What more do we need to know in terms of conflict entrepreneurs?
Well, let me just state some obvious facts, first of all. I mean, when you're talking about going into a gas flare community or a community that has experienced the trauma of some kind of ecological trauma, it could be an oil spill, that community has legacy grievances. It has a genuine right to feeling aggrieved by the injustices that were visited upon them through no fault of their own, by virtue of the fact that they were geographically located there. We term them impacted or host communities.
Yes.
And what we've found is that very often these genuine grievances have been manipulated by actors either within the community or outside the community for their own narrow rent-seeking benefit. So you might imagine a scenario where there is a community that has multiple ethnic groups that has experienced the trauma of gas flaring for many years, and a character might emerge and decide that it's in his interest to take an extortive view with respect to, by raising that genuine grievances, riling up the emotions in the society, maybe creating divisions between one ethnic group and another, and causing such a substantial mess,
yes,
in the hope that they can actually evince some kind of rent from the sponsors of that event. Well, very often these conflict entrepreneurs, as we term them, end up destroying projects. So what we're doing is we are taking a view that before an investor goes into a community, it's important that they engage in a certain type of host community engagement strategy.
Okay. So what strategy are you people employing, at least to address this?
Well, what we've done, actually, because we've actually understood that this is a key element, just like lack of infrastructure that you pointed out,
yes,
maybe lack of feedstock or whatever, lack of access to a seaport. A critical disenabler to this kind of investment is the potential of host community agitation. While you can model the risk that comes from maybe not having a piece of infrastructure ready for you, you can't get inside someone's head, and so therefore you can't model the uncertainty that comes with human interactions on a project, sure, unless you take prior steps to ensuring that individuals such as these conflict entrepreneurs that we've just described don't emerge onto the scene. So what we've done is we've devised a tool which is embedded in the program called the macro conflict risk impact assessment tool, which investors will be asked to, which will basically be a how-to guide for investors going into communities that have this kind of decades of trauma through ecological violations of their place, and articulates how to address them, how to determine the grievance, how to address that grievance prior to coming in and
so
making
all these are already encapsulated in the program turn up.
We already thought that.
Okay, gentlemen, let's quickly take a look at this other area, that being the movement, advocacy, and talking about the petroleum industrial bill, so as to clear some kind of fiscal regime which might underpin this investment. People are willing to come to do that. I don't know how this has been handled in terms of this program as well, because if people, at least they needed clarity to the fiscal framework in addressing some of these issues that could have been raised by other players in the sector.
Okay, if you listen to Mr. President's budget speech, he made it clear that he's aimed to address the physicals regarding the oil and gas industry, because over time we've lost close to over millions of dollars, and addressing the fiscals and working with the National Assembly will bring money into the coffers of the government to the tune of over $500 million US, and if not more.
Yeah.
On our part, we know that we've looked at it, and the Honourable Minister of State, His Excellency Chief Timothy Silva, some weeks back had a meeting with agencies and directors of the ministry, and he made a commitment where he unveiled his roadmap and deliverables in the oil and gas sector, which he called the 10 critical areas. Now, among those 10 criteria, number 3 is that he said he will complete the Nigerian gas flare commercialization program, which is encapsulated in the National Gas Policy, Chapter 6, Section 6.4. Now, alongside that, he has said he will work with Mr. President, who eventually is the Petroleum Minister, to see how they will sign off the petroleum industry bill, which will create room for investors to come in. Remember also, Mr. President in his speech at the budget submission made it clear that government will try to incentivize investors to come into the country that will boost government strategies, policies, plans, and aspirations. And then that way, this will now take out people out of poverty, which is one of which is the 10th critical areas for the Honourable Minister of State, Petroleum Resources Chief Timothy Silva as well. Now, if you look at what the NGFCP is trying to do, which again, which is key, which is part of government policy, from a policy point of view. Now, we NGFCP were doing the implementation phase of the policy of government, where we're going to create around 300,000 direct and indirect jobs. We're bringing in investors. Matter of fact, as part of our sensitization, some host communities are some of the qualified applicants in the gas flare commercialization that will be bidding for their own flares, which, by the way, are giving at almost free, 25 cents per thousand scope, the cheapest in the world.
Okay. So I know you've talked about this different steps. So what point are we now in what's already is being planned for this projects or the program? Let me use it as it is.
All right. So we are what I call the second and most critical phase of the program. So last year, November, we finalized the transaction and commercial structure of the program, again with the support of our development partners, David Foster, Charles, thanks to you again, and then our other partners from the USAID, Power Africa project, and then the third is the World Bank through the Global Gas Flare Reduction Initiative, GGFR. So we now issued the expression of interest to the public to say, if you're interested to play in this space, please register. And we have over 800 interested parties and then that registered.
Okay.
And then we now issued the request for qualification, and then about 240 companies submitted their qualifying statements, which then the Honourable Minister for State Petroleum Resources inaugurated a proposal evaluation committee to evaluate, to know those that are serious-minded and those that are not serious. And at the end of the day, over 205, around 205 qualified applicants are now going to the next phase, which is the request for proposal phase, where to submit the proposals.
Oh, okay, quickly, Charles, how satisfactory is what is on ground for development partners, or at least like yours and others who have taken a look at the program so far at this stage?
Well, look, Nigeria is one of the largest markets in the world, certainly in Africa. So it's clear that producing materials that are being exported, that are being imported rather, locally, there is definitely a market for it as well here. I think this project, being the most robust gas flare initiative in the world, is worthy of a country the size of Nigeria. I think that the program has exceeded all expectations. You know, it hasn't been easy going, but I think the firm will of this government and the very dogged determination that has undergirded our initiatives will bring this program into fruition very, very soon.
All right. Charles Majomi, Team Lead, Gas Portfolio Facility for Oil Sector Transparency and Reform in Nigeria, FOSTA. Thank you very much for coming on Nigeria Today. I appreciate your time and insights. Also like to appreciate Justice Derefaka. He's a Program Manager, Nigeria Gas Flare Commercialization Program, Office of the Minister of State for Petroleum Resources. Thank you too for coming on the program.
Thank you for having me.
We appreciate your insight as well. And thank you for watching. Nigeria Today is on every weekday at 7:30 in the evening. My name is Blessing Abu. Enjoy the rest of the day.